So how do you ensure that your study of God does not detract from your relational experience of him?
I don't know that you can ensure it in the sense of like that word carries the sense of certainty. But I just try to make sure I have balance in my life. So listening to a lot of worship music, going to church, and I make an intentional effort to be like, don't be critical. Don't look for areas I miss. Listen and receive and personalize it. And that's a discipline I have to do because I go into like professor apologetics mode. So those are two things in particular that I try to do.
I mean, you could think of any sort of relationship, right? Like, you wouldn't like study your wife as like in like a scientific sense and so on, but you want to get to know more about your wife as time goes on. And as that happens over years, there are intellectual facts you can learn about your wife over time. You know more and more, but at the same time, you have a loving relationship with your wife. They kind of enhance each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like your relationship makes you want to know more, but knowing more actually helps you be better in your relationship. So I would apply something similar to God.
I think Scripture draws this picture of there being understanding what God is like, and then a knowledge of God personally. And that we both know him and understand him. And these are two things that are kind of given us something we really want to boast in throughout Jeremiah. And I think for me, trying to figure out, all right, there are certain things in studying about God that could just become cerebral and abstract knowledge, but it should lead ultimately, good theology leads to greater doxology, a worship of God. And so forming habits in my own life, like personal worship, prayer time, spending time with God's people and building them up in what I'm learning, asking the question, so what, to what I'm learning about God, they've been really useful habits to making sure that I grow deeper in my relationship with God, even as I get better understanding of God.
That has never been a scare for me, to be honest. For me, it's always gone hand in hand that as I ask those big questions and I devote myself to the study of God and Scripture and just asking the big sort of natural theological questions and so on, it's just always been devotional for me, honestly. Wow. Yeah, it's just never been a distraction. Again, it took that season of doubt, though, to kind of, I think, really put me into that mode, that direction, because this was like life-giving. I was asking not just for theological academic reasons, but asking because I wanted to know, and I wanted to know him ultimately. And then it truly was devotional because it expanded my mind and expanded my knowledge of God, and then enriched, again, like that relationally. I think that's pretty beautiful.
You know, I think the danger, and I know that a lot of you are kind of thinking about apologetics and the rest of these things. One of the dangers, I think, with the life of the mind as an academic is that we can get kind of trapped in our minds and we talk to ourselves about things a lot. And I would say one of the things you could cultivate is, how do I actually talk to God about this? And maybe it's something you're struggling with God about. Does God really love me? Well, instead of just kind of wrestling through that, like, what would it mean to talk to God? God, I don't know. Like, God, I wrestle with, like, will you really receive me in the full truth of who I am? And so I would say turn that to God. And I think that's what it ends up kind of undermining an overly, I don't want to say overly heady, because we don't need to be less heady, but we need to be more integrated. And so it's, how are these questions, concerns, worries, frustrations, arguments, how are they leading me to God and not merely to kind of just reason with myself about him?
I got into apologetics because I had questions and the church wouldn't answer them. I wasn't asking questions to be contrary. I was asking because, call me crazy, but I believe that if there was a God, then there would be answers to my questions. But the church being ill-equipped to answer my questions would kind of sometimes shut me down. So it was out of a relationship with God that I thought, I want to learn because I know he those answers, and I know the answers are there. I've always thought if something's true, I shouldn't be afraid to learn it if all truth is grounded in God in one way or another. So the more I learned about God, it's the more I began to just increase my love for him naturally, because I was so amazed at who he was. I want to grow and know more intimately this God. I mean, Scripture says, I want you to know the height and depth and length and width of the love of God. So knowledge is crucial to our relationship. So it comes down to the heart posture, not necessarily how many books am I reading or not reading. It's, why am I reading these for?
Morning devotionals. And one of the things that's really hard for me to do is that you read a text. Sometimes you read a text to study that text, and even when you're doing your devotionals, you study the text. But what I found is that prayer before devotionals focuses me on, I just need to absorb this. I need to know who you are, not just what this text says, but what does it say about you. I think that's a big part of it. And then doing devotionals with someone else, because you see the way they've reacted to the text, and they've reacted to, you've seen their faith get shaped. And when they bring in an experience, in other words, don't study the Bible alone, because when someone else experiences it and they express how their faith is shaped by their study, you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, there's like so many ways in which their life enriches mine, and their relationship with the Lord becomes something I'm thirsty for. And so it constantly makes me thirsty, not just to know who he is, but to really experience who he is and have that relational aspect of my faith.
I have had that tendency in the past of wanting to just always extract the meaning of the text and not wanting to listen to anybody else. But I had this reflective Bible study where we would read through the passage several times with a group, and we'd write down what we feel like God is saying about humanity, what it says about God, and what we feel like God is speaking to us. And that practice was just amazing to see these people coming out with things that I never would have thought of ever before. And reflecting that back to me was just amazing.
Oh, that's terrific. And one other thing I would say, one other addition thing is not only when you have that interaction with somebody in the course of study, but then serving people in non-apologetics ways hones your relationship with the Lord. It really does. That's why Jesus says, whenever you did this to the least of these, you did it to me. What do you do to people you have a relationship with? You clothe, you feed, you care for, you nurture. So when you're doing it to somebody else in a non-apologetic, non-nerdy, non-study way, you're doing it to him. And how can you not develop a relationship?